National insurance was schoolboy economics. You thought it was nauseating that the businessmen were coming out against it.
Defend both of those.
Well, then, yes, but you produce a manifesto a week later that says that you too would like to withdraw the national insurance rise.
No, we have not committed ourselves.
You have said in the manifesto you would like to.
Well, let me quote Stephanie in the manifesto. Yeah. You would say that you would like to reverse it. Quote, when resources allow, we would seek to reverse it.
Yes. Well,
that's the nauseating schoolboy economics you've just attacked.
No, not at all. What is schoolboy is to make a commitment to reduce the tax, to not have the means of paying for it, other than vague assurances about increasing efficiency. That was what we call schoolboy economics. But it is quite right to say that the national insurance increase is not a good tax. It does increase taxes on payrolls. It's in an ideal world, it wouldn't have happened, and in an ideal world, you reverse these taxes. There aren't funds to do it.
Any voter listening to you at the beginning of the campaign would think, they're actually supporting the government on this. And a week later, oh, hang on, no, they're not supporting the government. It's very unclear to get your position.
No, you've actually read the extract quite correctly, that it's not a desirable tax increase, but there aren't funds to reverse it, so we accept the government's increase as a matter of fact.
Isn't the reason why he's able to produce a poster like that, and it resonates, is because your party's got previous on this. You doubled VAT to 15%, you then added another 2.5% to it. And when we look at your figures, the easiest way for you to give us what the bulk of the structural deficit cut should be is a rise in VAT.
I think we've got to do the difficult work, which is dealing with public expenditure. And I'm clear that dealing with the way we've got to deal with this very large budget deficit that Alistair's bequeathed the country is by primarily looking at public expenditure. And the guide I take is one that has been produced by international bodies, and indeed the Treasury themselves have produced a report, but Alistair won't publish it, which says that 80% of the work in dealing with a large structural deficit should come from expenditure restraint, 20% from tax increases, and maybe Alistair will publish the document in the next couple of days, but I think that's what the Treasury have been advising him as well.
But you're carefully not ruling out an increase in VAT. Can you go further than saying we have no plans to increase VAT?
Well, look,
because I remember Michael Heseltine had no plans to stand against Margaret Thatcher.
Well, look, when I became the Shadow Chancellor in 2005, almost the very first question, probably from you, Andrew, was a question about whether I was going to rule out tax increases. And I said, I can't rule out tax increases, and no one doing my job can responsibly do that. But what I can say is I will do everything I can to make sure that we get the effort done through public expenditure restraint, and that I'm pretty confident that we've got the plans to do that. So that's why I say we've got no plans to increase VAT.
But since the election started, your emphasis on the deficit, which you talked about for about a year, seems to have gone by the way, because practically every day you announce another tax cut without being at all clear as to how it would be paid for. And so far you have got £38 billion worth of promises being made. You do not have a credible way of funding it. You may not like my plans, but I actually do have a plan for halving the deficit in a four-year period.
Do you know what? Over 100 of the leading employers in Britain think it's a bad plan. Over 1,000 small businesses today have come out against it. So I don't deny you've put forward some proposals. The problem is they're going to kill jobs and kill the recovery.
David Cameron a couple of weeks ago said that of the national increase postponement, he did not have the money to pay for that over a 5-year period. Now, have you thought up where to get the money since then?
Now you're just putting words into David Cameron's mouth.
Today programme.
Well, that is just not what he said. And it's not. We're very clear.
I know
and we're using the advice, by the way, of people like Peter Gershon and Martin Reed, who you turned to for advice, but suddenly now you don't think their advice is worth listening to, that we can find efficiency savings this year and in the subsequent years, because, of course, you start on a lower public expenditure baseline once you've found those savings. And that means we can avoid this jobs tax. I mean, when are you actually going to listen to people like Marks and Spencer's, Sainsbury's, Boots, Mothercare, Chorus Steel, who are telling you that your tax proposal is going to cost jobs?
Stephanie Flanders.
We're sick of hearing, in a way, about how national insurance rise is going to cost jobs as a job tax. Can you think of a tax rise?
The public are still listening to this argument, and we've got 2 weeks to go to the election.
OK, but I'm interested in what you think about taxes in general. Are there any tax rises you think that don't cost jobs? I mean, which would you prefer? If you don't like national insurance rises, which don't cost jobs?
I'm a low-tax conservative who would like to be able to reduce taxes, but I'm well aware of the current situation. We've got lots of labour taxes in the pipeline, some of which have just come in, like the 50% tax rate for top earners, and I've got to make a judgment about which ones I can avoid. And for me, the priority was to avoid the tax rises on the many, not the tax rises on the few, partly for reasons of equity, And therefore, I'm not able to make a commitment on the 50% tax rate, for example.
But, but if you're going to cut public spending, you think that doesn't cost jobs? Well, we know that that's going to be tens of thousands of jobs lost.
The challenge is the one that Alistair has left us with, which is this massive deficit. And, of course, under all of us, and I think now Treasury ministers have admitted it, there's going to be a lower headcount in the public sector. But if you're looking at taxes, surely an employment tax, a jobs tax, is the thing that you would reach first to avoid.
OK. Thank you. Alistair Darling, can we just look at your attitude to VAT and to other tax rises? You've not ruled it out either. But you promised in the last Labour manifesto not to raise income tax. You broke that promise. You've also used national insurance rises as a form of income tax, as a way of getting round your promise a second time. And you've pushed thousands of ordinary middle-income taxpayers, school teachers and so on, into the top band of tax by failing to increase the allowance in line with inflation. Why should anybody trust you on tax?
Well, look, firstly, the promises we've made on tax, whether it's income tax or VAT, are exactly the promises we've made, I think, in the last 3 elections.
And you broke them?
No, in relation to the top rate of income tax, yes, I had to do that because, frankly, given the need to get our borrowing down, had I not brought in that measure, then I think people would have said, well, why are you delaying doing something, especially when the people concerned have actually done fairly well over the last few years.
It brings in a couple of billion, Chancellor. That's all. There are other ways that you could have done it. The fact is, you raised a ton of money through national insurance, which for anybody, for 99% of people watching this programme, is the same as a rise in income tax. So you broke your word a second time.
In relation to national insurance, I mean, I remember it because I was asked about this in 2005. I said that no Chancellor, or indeed Shadow Chancellor, would rule out changing every single aspect of the tax system. Yes, we have had to raise taxes, especially for people on the top, and the national insurance...
And ordinary people with national insurance.
Coming in next year. But we've also made it clear we're going to have to take some difficult decisions in relation to public spending. But look, isn't the key thing this? All of us are agreed that our borrowing having risen, we've got to get it down over a 4-year period. Now, I have set out a plan to halve that borrowing over a 4-year period. What's quite clear from the exchange over the last 45 minutes is that his plans are actually incredible and his are starting to unravel. No one wants to put taxes up, but what they do want is a determined government that is going to get the borrowing back down, but do it in a way that doesn't damage the fabric of either our economy or our society.
You talk about the fabric of economy, the fabric of society. I mean, as we all know, economists disagree on a lot of things, but there is one thing that there's one thing that they agree on, and that all the academic evidence agrees on, is if you have to cut borrowing, you should do it by cutting spending and not by raising taxes, that it's more costly to the economy to raise taxes. So why are you then still planning to raise taxes by £16 billion if you're so worried about the economy?
I think you have to strike the right balance. And remember, public spending, yes, it will have to, take its share, but public spending also has some value. Investment in transport infrastructure, for example, in our education system, in universities. That will make a difference to our performance as a country over the next 10, 20 years. And actually, a lot of what we ought to be debating in this election is how do we see our country in that 10 to 20-year period? What action can we take to make sure we can rebuild our economy, get a balanced economy, so as Vince says, it's not all just financial services. That actually is the key issue for us all.
Vince Cable, you have dined out on a reputation for honesty and being more far-seeing in this economic crisis than Mr Darling and Mr Osborne. But in October 2008, you said it was entirely wrong for the government to stimulate the economy with more public spending. 4 months later, you said that the government was right to stimulate it. You described quantitative easing, printing of money, as the Robert Mugabe School of Economics. You later supported it. You originally supported the Lloyds TSB takeover of HBOS, and then you claimed that Lloyds was being dragged down by HBOS. You told the government not to tell the Bank of England what to do about interest rates. A few weeks later, you urged the government to tell the bank what to do about interest rates. Isn't the biggest myth of this election your reputation?
It certainly isn't a myth on the 4 points you've mentioned. One of them, which was the Lloyds HBOS takeover, I genuinely changed my mind having seen the evidence.
What about Robert Mugabe?
That was not a change of view. I don't know whether you ever read the article. Well, the point I was trying to make, which is a perfectly sensible one, was that if you resort to the deliberate creation of money, quantitative easing, it has dangers.
But you do support the policy?
I do support the policy, and I supported
Why
it
would you
from
call
the
it
very
Robin
outset.
McGabby then if you support the policy?
No,
I mean,
a
country with inflation of 1,000%.
If you'd actually read the article
I have read
wrote,
the article, as you know. I've
was
interviewed you on
written
this before.
in a tone of irony to illustrate what would happen if it was not properly managed.
Well, you know, we
but I
Scots are
fully
not